Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Heroes of the Storm, and today we'll be going over yet another hero. First and foremost, before we get to that though, I wanted to apologize for kind of the slowdown here on the content with heroes. Kind of a double strike here is that one, new job kind of demanded a bit more time than I was expecting, and the other is, well, they did a reset, and they reset all of our gold and progress, which I was expecting. Unfortunately, gold generation is nowhere near what it was, and I've had a hard time getting new heroes. So the two new heroes that came out, Anub'arak and Asmodan, I wanted to do videos on when they came out, but I just couldn't purchase them, and only now has Anub'arak entered free rotation. Asmodan is still yet to be available. So while I've got the chance, I've pretty much got today, we're going to go over Anub'arak. He is the Traitor King from Warcraft 3, and of course to change things up a little bit, I'm going to kind of show off the skin here and the other skins available first, and then we'll go into the try options and take a look at what he has. So this is the basic skin. Here's his master skin at level 10. So you can kind of get an idea of the differences of both. Very ornate. And then this one, I like this one. This is Cyberark Anub'arak. I like this one. I especially like this one because when you look at the backstory for the skin, it's kind of a reference to Pacific Rim. It's not the first one to happen either. It's pretty cool. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at Anub'arak's abilities. Alright, welcome to the Tri Arena. Now the first thing you can probably see with Anub'arak is that he doesn't have a traditional mount. He has his own mount mechanic in which he starts to fly. He gets the same speed, and he also has the same mount up requirements of having to channel for a couple seconds. So it's not like Rhaegar, who can instantly transform. He does have to do a mount up channel before he can move on, so he does have that. We'll give you your quick dance move, which apparently includes tap dancing sound effects. That's fun. Very nice. Okay, so Anub'arak. He is in Heroes of the Storm as a warrior, so that makes him somewhat tanky. He is less defensive than he is more of a crowd control tank. He focuses a lot on stuns and with certain talents slows. But he does have some options to be something of a summoner. He does have a trait where he's a scarab host. Under normal circumstances, you spawn a beetle every time you cast a spell. Now, they only last for about 10 seconds, and here at level 1, they only do about 10 damage, but that's not too bad, considering abilities do something around 68 and 64. So 10 seconds with beetles, that allows you to be a fairly pushy tank. You can push back against enemies fairly easily, and depending upon how you build, that means you can also capture jungle camps with him. And he even has talents to make that happen, such as Mercenary Lord, which is a pretty standard one for junglers to give them more power, more health. Whichever camp you get, of course, get something different. So with this, every time I cast something, before I go over the abilities, I'll kind of show it off. I use a couple abilities, and there we go. I've got a few beetles in the line. So under normal circumstances, I have about 3 beetles, and as you can see, yeah, they cause the turrets to fire. So that's why he's very good at pushing lanes. You can kill minions fairly easily, and the whole reason why you can jungle with him fairly easily is because, of course, they'll be distracted by his beetles. And again, that's why you can take towers fairly easily as well. Just you're constantly putting something down to take their attention. Now, of course, you're probably going to still want some minions, because if I come up here, obviously, I can't do too much with the beetles, but you can see that I did do a little bit of damage to the tower, and I did take a bit of their ammo. But that's something you're probably not going to want to do without at least some kind of backup push. Alright, let's take a look at his initial abilities. You have Impale. It's a 12-second cooldown. It deals 68 damage, or deals a bit of damage. It stuns for 1¼ seconds. So this is the one that goes in a line. I'll go ahead and toggle minions, so you can take a look at it. So it's a straight line skill shot. It does have a little bit of travel time, and it doesn't go up instantly. So if an enemy is running away, they might have a chance to get away from it. I'll kind of show it off there. You can see it pushes Arthas up a bit. It does have a little bit of that stun, and that is where Anub'arak specializes, is with using that stun. Before I go over W, I'll show how it interacts with Burrow Charge. This one has a 14-second cooldown. You burrow to a location and you do a bit of damage, and you briefly stun enemies in a small area upon surfacing. And you can reactivate the ability to surface early. So if you use it, you can see I would probably go past Arthas. Like, I'll go ahead and show this, and I'll go to the back of the lane. Now, the beautiful thing is when you're burrowing, you can't be hit. So I'll go through, and you'll see I don't take any damage from passing Arthas with his aura. But at any time I want to pop up early, I can hit that E key again in order to come up where I want. So let's kind of start here, and you'll see I'll go up right around at Arthas there. The stun isn't very long. It isn't like the Q, which has a second and a half. The stun is very brief, and it's really just meant to kind of halt them for a moment or stop them from casting abilities. Like if they've got a channeled ability that they're doing, you really want to stop it. Anub'arak is great for pairing up with heroes that may have a lot of burst, because then you can come up, they're trying to run away, oh no, look, I stopped him, not only that, but I body blocked him, so he had to go around, and then of course you've got a bit of damage as well as a stun on the Impale. You can see here that's at 76 damage, this is at 73, so both the Impale and the Burrow Charge have a good amount of damage that they both do, so Anub'arak can be very lethal when it comes to hitting enemies with those. Not only that, but keep in mind you're also getting beetles around you, which can do a little extra damage when you're chasing down heroes. Now your final ability is more defensive in nature, which is very fitting of his warrior status. You have Hidden Carapace. It is an 8-second cooldown, lasts 3 seconds, and in this case gives me about 180 point shield from a 980 hit point pool. I brought Anub'arak up to level 30 to kind of give you a better idea of where these numbers are. You can see it's about a 10-20 point shield on a 6,000 health pool at level 30. So the shield is roughly about 17% of your health, which can be a pretty nice chunk. So I'll go ahead and activate it, and you can see it there. And keep in mind that, of course, it does summon beetles. So it's got kind of a dual purpose. You get yourself a minor shield, and you get a beetle. So if you think something is about to hit you, something big's about to come in, or hell, you just want to summon a beetle, it can be very useful for that. Looking at the damages, since they were fairly close before, we can see that Impale and Burrow are still about the same, 300 compared to 325. So not a huge difference between those two. Also, the beetles are hitting at about 68 damage, so they're doing about 20% damage of anything else that I have. So summoning a bunch of those can really be helpful for pushing a lane. Alright, so we've looked at his primary abilities. Let's go ahead and take a look at his ultimates here. So we've got the first ultimate is Locust Swarm. Locust Swarm deals 260 damage per second in an area around Anub'arak. Each enemy damage heals Anub'arak for about 70 health. Now this ability lasts for about 8 seconds, so the total damage you're going to do with this ability is about 2,000. With Anub'arak's health pool, that's about a third of his health pool. That can be very useful. Not only that, but it's healing him all the while you're doing that damage. So this can be very useful if you get into a group of enemies, maybe say 2 or 3, try to get the jump on you. You can sit there and do a whole bunch of damage across the entire group. Now, it is not a huge heal. It is basically enough to keep you alive. I'll go ahead and pop it now, and you can see my health is going up because I had quite a bit of minions. But it's not super damaging because of how long it lasts. Now, it can be used to, as you can see, damage things around me, such as towers. It is mainly there to help you get into a group fight and sustain inside of that group fight by getting your health back. But it's not going to keep you alive if a bunch of enemies decide that they want to focus on you. So it's great for engagements, but don't think you're invulnerable because of it. But damn, can it do quite a bit of damage if the enemy decides to stay around you. I have entered in fights, say 2 against 1, or maybe even 3 at most, and come out, at least I would still die if it was around that time, because obviously you're fighting 2 heroes, but I would still manage to take one with me most of the time when I was using this. Of course, I was using in conjunction with a bunch of beetles as well, which I was using to heal me, so there is a little caveat there. But this can help you even out a fight if you get ambushed. Now, before I forget to mention it, I do want to show the level 20 modification for your Locust Swarm. This is Hive Master. Anub'arak will gain a permanent vampire locust that attacks a nearby enemy every 3 seconds. So It's not a per second thing, every 3 seconds, and it deals, in this case, 496, which is again is a level 30 number, and it returns and heals you for about 140. So not a huge amount of a heal either, but it is incidental damage that you're adding on top of the fact that you're summoning beetles along with you as well. Now, the Hive Master Locusts are not a minion that is targetable, which means they're not going to help you absorb damage. They can't be killed. They're just there to add additional incidental damage. What makes it kind of an interesting ultimate, it's almost like Qin Stormstout, where he would get the ability, when he got his damaging ability where he split into 3, Storm, Earth, and Fire, he could get a modifier that would allow him to summon them over time. So the ultimate ability that you chose at that point also affected the way your standard gameplay would happen, and that happens here with Anub'arak as well. But looking at his second ultimate, we have Web Blast. This one's pretty nice in that it is fairly short cooldown. It's 45 seconds. If you've ever played Arachne in Smite, you kind of know what this does. It's a little bit different. Arachne's pulls in, this one does not. This wraps a target in a cocoon for 5 seconds. When they're wrapped in the cocoon, they're unable to act and they're untargetable. Allies of the hero can attack the cocoon to break it and free them early. Now in this game, it's an interesting ability that has great potential, but there's some issues I have with it. I've had some success with it. If you're going for a crowd control tank, this is probably the one you want, because you can basically take an enemy out of the fight for 5 seconds. So here, let's say, oh, Arthas has got that damage, or I don't want to deal with that right now. I want to kill his lane before I deal with him. So there we go. I've wrapped him. Okay, now I can deal with Arthas. And as you can see, the AI ignores him because he became untargetable. So when you wrap someone in this game using Web Wrap or Web Blast, you can't hurt them. So basically, you're just removing them from combat. You can't, it's not like a stun where you're doing a bunch of damage, and it is for 5 seconds, which is one of the longest types of stuns in the game, which makes it great. But the downside is, even though it's a fairly long stun, enemies can hit them out of it. So that 5 seconds could turn into 1 second or half a second, depending upon if the enemy is doing their job. Now in that case, we saw that the towers actually actively helped him out of it. So I've seen where it's been very useful, but I've seen that it's been negated the entire time too. It's one of those things where Web Blast is great, but you probably need to have a team to back you up to use it right. Otherwise, Locust Swarm might serve you better because it's going to be extra damage. Because if you web wrap somebody in a group fight and your team doesn't take advantage of it, like let's say you web blast somebody and then your team decides to run away, it's not very helpful. But at the same time, if you need to help a teammate, this can be used to help save them. Now at level 20 you can get Crypt Weave. Crypt Weave allows you to channel to lengthen the time the target is trapped. Now this is nice in that it can last a while, but it also takes Anub'arak out of the fight. So to kind of put this into perspective, I'm going to go ahead and hit R, and then if you target him again, you'll notice you're weaving and you're continuing to do it, but you notice that the health is still going down, which means I didn't complete the channel really. And again, keep in mind that the enemies can attack the target that's being wrapped. So if I do this again, and target him again, so let's kind of see how long he's wrapped. So I got about 8 seconds worth of weave time there, which is pretty nice. I mean, it's one of those things where you think about it, 8 seconds of keeping an enemy out of combat sounds really nice, but at the same time you're keeping Anub'arak out of combat. I have to channel that weave on the enemy that I want to hit, and so that means I can't help do damage to anyone else. I can keep an enemy out of the fight, but I'm also keeping myself out of the fight. The beautiful thing about Web Blast by itself is that you're taking an enemy out of the fight without taking yourself out of the fight. But then when you go to channel it, both of you are out of that fight. So you've taken a 5-on-5 that may have turned to a 5-on-4 with Web Wrap, and then you're scaling it back down to a 4-on-4. Now, depending upon how good your enemy team is, this isn't bad because you could be taking someone out that has been helping the team or might be the linchpin of their whole assault. And that's useful. But again, they could turn around and target their ally and pull them out of it. I feel like this one's not really the best ultimate modifier that I've seen. Maybe if it lasted a little bit longer, or it's hard to say on that one, because this can be very unbalancing if it's not changed in the right way. So far, this is one of those things I think your mileage could vary. I haven't had very much luck with using the channel version of this, but I can see where it can be nice. Just the downside is not only, again, are you taken out of the fight, but you're very vulnerable while you're sitting there and channeling. So the enemy team could decide, oh hey, that Anub'arak is a very tasty target because he can't fight back right now. So be very careful when you decide to go into Cryptweave. Alright, let's take a look at Anub'arak's various abilities. He starts off with the general warrior stuff. He has Regeneration Master here at level 1. Regeneration globes will gather and give you additional health per second permanently. This is very nice, but some of the other options actually seem like they could be very useful. We have Persistent Carapace. This increases your hardened carapace shield duration by 2 seconds. Keep in mind that it is currently 3 seconds, so that gives you a total of a 5-second shield. If you're not very good at timing hardened carapace, or if you want to have a little bit extra protection, the longer lasting shield can be helpful, especially as it can be combined with other talents to increase its shield size. So you can get a larger shield that also lasts longer, which can make you fairly tanky, but not only tanky in the like normal tanks, but an active tank. So you know damage is coming in and you pop your shield to negate it. It's not like you're just sitting there with a whole bunch of passive defenses. You are actively in control of your own defenses in this case. Assault Scarab is another one of those kind of passive things. This increases the damage of the spawn beetles by 25%. So as you can see here, looking at the 12 damage compared to the 76, they really don't do quite that much. These beetles do roughly 15% per second of the damage of your abilities. If you get the talent that increases their damage by 25%, then they do about 20% of your damage. So you're basically getting a 5% overall like damage boost there. It can be very nice though if you're summoning a lot of beetles, or if you're going for a summoning kind of build. That can be quite useful, because enemies may never expect that. They may be focusing on you, and then all of a sudden they realize, oh hey, I've been surrounded by 3 different beetles, and now all of a sudden a bunch of damage is hitting me. So that can add up quickly. So it doesn't seem like a lot immediately, but it is one of those things that can kind of sneak up on enemies, and it can be quite useful depending upon what you're planning to do. If you're planning on murking, or if you're planning on just pushing a lane really hard. The extended spikes is the one that can be quite useful for you. It's not a huge boost. It says 25%, but if we look at it, let's kind of measure it with these bushes here, I think. So it's just a little bit past, right around to these flowers here on a standard, using the standard ability. We get the increased range to increase it by about 25%, and you can see there you get a nice little increase there. So it is very nice, but as if you look at the grand scheme of things about how much farther it goes, like compare to say something like Zagara's extended range, which pretty much doubles it, it's not a lot longer. But what this means is that you have better chances of getting an entire enemy team if they're running together or in a line. That gives you a better chance of, 1, getting enemies that are trying to escape, or 2, keeping a bit of a distance away from the fight before you initiate with your stuns. So this one can, again, it's kind of a mileage may vary thing. It really depends on how far away you stay or how good you are with the shots. This can help even people that are good with their shots, because it can help you get that extra distance on an enemy that might not be expecting it. We've got a few more passive type abilities here at rank 4. We've got Superiority, which reduces the damage you take from non-heroic enemies by 50%. So if you're going for a lane push or merc type Anub'arak, once again, this is great for that, because then the enemies just aren't really going to hurt you. You'll much less damage from this. It's night and day really what I've seen that happen. Like when I've gone out and done a character fighting in the jungle and fought the merc camps, having this ability can be the difference between having, say, a night camp kill you or being able to very easily kill that night camp. So this is a very useful one for those that want to go against the go against mercenaries, go against anything that's non-player. So we go over here, I want to kind of see if it affects the towers. You can see there about 2 hits, took me down quite a bit. We'll get the non-hero damage reduced. And you can see that even against towers, so pushing a lane with this, quite useful indeed. The next passive is Locust Needles. Basic attacks will deal 35% of your basic attack damage in an area around the target. Not too much really to show there. It does exactly what it says on the tin. You hit a target and you do area damage. So that is great if you're constantly fighting a group of enemies, be it creep or players. Underking is another one in the vein of, say, extended spikes. Underking increases the range and gives you a lower cooldown of Burrow Charge, which this is exceptionally useful because Burrow Charge not only is a great offensive ability for stunning, it's a great defensive ability too. I've used it both ways. Underking can be used to scale walls. You can get behind enemy defenses, you can get past walls, you can basically, it's almost like a blink. You can get wherever you need to go with Burrow Charge, so it can be used in many different ways. It's not as quite of a short of cooldown as, say, Illidan's Blink, but the fact that it also stuns when you come out of it is what makes this a fantastic ability. So let's kind of, once again, we'll use these bushes, I think, as a comparison. If we take a look at this, we can see you go right here at the end. But the best part is not only is it increased range, it's a lower cooldown. It lowers the cooldown by 2 seconds. Normally it's a 14 second. This brings it down to 12, meaning your Burrow Charge and your Impale both have a 12-second cooldown if you get this talent. So we'll go ahead and show it off here. Once again, there it is. And we'll get the increased range and lower cooldown. And you see it goes around the same length. Like if you get both of those talents, if you get both extended spikes and Underking, they would both have the exact same distance that they could cover, which means you would have either option to stop enemies that are trying to get away. Finally, here at rank 4, you have the Legion of Beetles. Again, it kind of does what it says on the tin, but I want to show it off because it's a little bit different from other summon abilities that I've seen. So, Legion of Beetles periodically spawns beetles every 8 seconds. And, of course, we can't see it right now because the minions aren't toggled, but if I toggle the minions on... Oh, actually, I do believe it's because I'm flying. Let's go ahead and go on the ground. There we go. Yeah. Now that I'm on the ground, I have beetles that are now spawning. So now I don't have to cast abilities in order to have beetles. They're just going to constantly occur. Now, the best part about this, and you might not think it's too big of a deal, because I didn't at first either, is the fact that I can turn it off by clicking on, or hitting D, clicking on my trait. So why might that be useful, you might be wondering, because, I mean, don't you really want those things constantly pushing? Well, one thing I've noticed is that with anybody that has continual summons, and something like that, like, say, Abathur, the problem with that is that if Abathur were to, say, try and hide somewhere, he could give his position away by them constantly running out. Same thing with Anub'arak. By constantly having these little beetles, my position could be given away. Maybe I'm in a bush, trying to wait on someone to come by, so that maybe someone's trying to bait the enemy so that I can go in and help stun, and then we can do some burst damage. If I've got these beetles on, enemies are going to be able to see that I'm hiding in this location, because if I come down here, we'll just kind of show that off. It's like, oh hey, I'm in the bush, the enemy has no idea I'm here. Oh hey, that beetle just came out of nowhere. I wonder if Anub'arak's hiding there. That's pretty much what it is. So I think that is, I'm very glad to see that they were very conscious of that being an issue. Alright, rank 7, let's get some of the more passive abilities out of the way. First is Mercenary Lord. We've talked a little bit about that already. You capture jungle camps, and if they're siege giants, you get 50% increased damage. If they're knights, you get 50% increased health. This doesn't do anything for the golems, as they're already powerful enough as it is. I couldn't imagine them being buffed by Mercenary Lord, but this can be very useful if you're going out and jungling for your team. The next is Leeching Scarabs. The beetles will heal Anub'arak for 50% of the damage with each attack if he is nearby. So you can't just kind of put them down and hope to get the healing when they're off. Now this can be quite useful again for if you're merking. If you're pushing a lane, you probably more want this than, say, you would want Mercenary Lord if you're going after the mercenary camps. But the Leeching Beetles can be very useful if you're going for more of a push build. Or if you kind of want a little bit more sustain. The Leeching Beetles combined with the Locust Swarm can give you a lot of surprise healing that the enemy might have to burn through. Another passive one is the Shed Exoskeleton. Using Hardened Carapace will increase Anub'arak's movement speed by 25% for 3 seconds. So if you're really going for trying to hunt down an enemy, trying to push forward, this can be very useful to stop enemies from running away if you need it. And again, that's kind of passive because when you use it, you just run faster. Alright, so we've got two abilities that we can really look at here. The Bed of Barbs. You create a bed of spikes along Impale's path that slows enemies' movement speed by 30%. It also deals 32 damage per second. So this doesn't just hit the enemy and slow them. It creates a bed of spikes, and these spikes last for about 3.5 seconds. So I'll go ahead and show that off here. So we have the spikes, and then they kind of hang around a bit. And these will do extra damage and slow the enemy. So if you're trying to, help a teammate get away, even if you miss, you can do this and create a barrier that the enemy would have to pass through, and if they're mounted, it'll unmount them because it's doing damage. Unless they're like Regura or something, but even in that case, he should still be slowed down. So this can be very useful for keeping the enemy from getting away. But not only that, but if your allies are using something like Executioner, that's a slow. That's something that will allow them to do extra damage. So whenever you're a tank, that's kind of something to keep in mind. If you're an assassin, if you have a tank that has some kind of slow, or another ability, or your allies have some kind of slow, getting Executioner can really increase your damage by quite a bit. The last one of this tier is Urticating Spines. Casting Hardened Carapace will also deal 122 damage to nearby enemies. Now, comparatively, that's actually quite a bit, because if you look at Impale, at this level it's 124, Burrow Charge is 127, and that's 122. So that means I now have 3 damaging abilities instead of just 2 damaging abilities and 1 stun. So if I come over here and use my Carapace, you can see that was actually a pretty good amount of damage to Arthless's minion line. And it can give you a surprise burst of damage. Now, the range on it, let's kind of take a look here, is not very long. So let's go in here and see that, yeah, I'm not hitting that back line from here. There we go. So it's a very close range thing. But that can be useful if you're wanting to get some kind of additional burst on your character.
For the frozen throne.
Rank 13 is mostly passive. You have Burning Rage. This is a fairly standard one that happens on a lot of the tankier characters. Deals damage nearby enemies. So in this case, we see 36 damage per second at level 13. So it's a persistent amount of damage. If you're trying to do a bunch of AoE, this can be helpful against pushing big groups, such as pushing lanes or for getting certain camps. Alternatively, if you want to be a bit tanky, you can go for Spell Shield. Upon taking ability damage, reduce all ability damage taken by 50% for 2 seconds. And it only triggers once every 30 seconds. But that is a massive reduction of damage, 50%. So if you know the enemies are constantly maybe stunning and bursting you, you can use this to kind of dampen that damage a bit. So if you know what's happening all at once, this can be quite useful. Alternatively, you've got Chitinous Plating, which increases Hardened Carapace shield amount by 50%. And we can see here it's a pretty good amount already. On the health bar, you increase that by 50%, and you can be fairly tanky when you activate it. Keep in mind, again, the duration of Hardened Carapace is only 3 seconds, 5 seconds at most, if you get both talents. So this is quite nice, but this is probably something you're want to get if you're really good at picking and choosing when the ability is about to hit you. This can be good, for example, say Nova is trying to kill you with triple tap. It will give you a very quick shield to kind of negate it at least a little bit. But that's something that is going to be one of those where your mileage specifically, especially on this one, is going to vary. If you're good at it, I'm not so good at it usually. I end up spamming it half the time, and sometimes I just want to put beetles down. So it's really not something that I worry about too much. Now, if you're going for a beetle build, here's one that can be quite nice for you. Anub'arak's beetles are also granted a shield equal to 510. So mine is right now 510. So yeah, it gives the beetles a shield equal to your own health. So if I kind of put one down, I'll go ahead and use that. We'll go ahead and put one down. There's the beetle. If I activate the carapace, you can see that that shield that they have is worth half of their health. So that's going to keep them alive. That's going to really help push forward. So if you're going for that kind of summoning build, that can be something you might want to look at, because then you can push a bunch of beetles forward. You can give them the shield while they're taking shots from towers or something like that.
Choose a talent.
So let's look at 16. We've got some of the standard things here. We've got Blood for Blood. This one happens a lot at this rank. It's a 15% steal of maximum health and slow movement speed by 30%. That's honestly very useful. It does a bunch of damage, it slows the enemies down. This can be useful for trying to stop an enemy from getting away but doing a bit of damage. However, I think Rewind, if that's what you're trying to do, if you're going for a crowd control type of tank, Rewind might be a bit better. It reduces the cooldowns of basic abilities by 10 seconds and can be used every minute. This Rewind is one of those abilities I don't use often, but in a case like Anub'arak is one of those where I would probably highly recommend it based on what you're doing. If you're really pushing for the crowd control thing, this is very useful because your abilities are only on a 12 and 14 second cooldown. That means when you activate Rewind, you only have to wait 2 seconds or 4 seconds respectively. And if you got the talent for Burrow Charge, it's only 2 seconds for each. And this is one of those things you cannot underestimate. Getting another stun out in 2 seconds, not only that, but 2 stuns, you've got Burrow Charge and Impale, you can really stop an enemy force or stop an enemy from getting away. And not only that, but they do a decent amount of damage, so using them that quickly in succession can be very helpful to you. Beetle Juiced, which is a wonderful talent name, is if a beetle kills an enemy, its duration is refreshed, becomes fully healed, and gains 100% bonus health and damage. The effect can only occur once per beetle, so that's nice. They get recharged and they gain double health and damage, but you have to keep in mind they only really last for 10 seconds anyway. But again, summoner builds could find that quite useful. If you're pushing a line, they're usually going to be killing minions and getting that additional boost there. That double damage for even 10 seconds can help you quite a bit, especially since that does combine with your Assault Scarab, which gives them 25% increased damage. So you're looking at 125% damage total, which again can be a source of damage that an enemy may not exactly expect. They may expect it to be coming from you, not from your minions. Alright, lastly we have Epicenter. It increases the impact area and damage of charge by 100%. So the impact area of charge and the damage are pretty nice actually, because you look at this will turn your Burrow Charge into your most damaging ability. Impale is at 188 damage. Burrow Charge is at 199. We get this, and now we're at 398. You want a massive amount of burst, then this is going to be your go-to ability if you get Epicenter. And that, again, can be something that enemies don't expect. If you're being an offensive Anub'arak, if you're going after the enemy and you are trying to stop them as best you can, that can be quite useful. So we'll go ahead and pop up. A good amount of damage, and you also saw it's got a pretty decent radius at this point, so we'll go ahead and clear cooldown. It's really not obvious to see what the enhanced range is on it. The biggest part of this is not really going to be that additional range, because additional range is nice. It can be useful if you're going into a team fight, as it helps you hit more enemies and maybe stun them. But keep in mind that stun is only very brief. The big thing about Epicenter is going to be really the damage that you can do, the additional damage, which honestly is a pretty good burst coming from a warrior like Anub'arak. But again, if you're going for crowd control, if that's specifically your goal, then you probably want Rewind. Even though you can get more people with Epicenter, really the whole point of Epicenter is damage, is what it feels like to me. So it's probably not one of those that I would focus on. Now we'll go ahead and look at level 20. The Hive Master and Kripwe we've already gone over, so the only other things he has, and the only two things you get before you level him, are Resurgence of the Storm and Fury of the Storm. So Fury of the Storm basic attacks bounce twice to nearby enemies for 50% damage. On a tank, that's so-so, but again, if you're pushing, maybe you're pushing a lane, you can use that, and you can even combine that with Locust Needles, which you do 35% additional damage to enemies around you. So combine that with Fury of the Storm, you could do a pretty decent amount of area damage. This isn't really going to make or break a team fight, but it is something that can get a lot of incidental damage that maybe the enemy won't expect, or maybe you're just using against the line. Resurgence of the Storm is a pretty common one, especially for tankier characters. Upon dying, you respawn back after 5 seconds. It occurs every 2 minutes. So that's not too bad. Resurgence of the Storm is especially useful for a character like Anub'arak because they're going to probably try and take you out because of your ability to stun. The ability to come back into combat 5 seconds after that and help stun again, you are going to be very useful for your team for stopping the enemy from getting anywhere. And honestly, it's getting to the point where I'm seeing Resurgence of the Storm being maybe just a little bit too powerful. Because one thing that I have seen is that multiple teams have been using Resurgence of the Storm on everybody that can possibly get it. So you think you've killed the enemy team, and oops, nope, looks like they're back. And so a team that doesn't have Resurgence of the Storm ends up getting pushed back a bit, because all of a sudden the enemy team, instead of having what was you thought 5 people you had to kill, is now 8. So Resurgence of the Storm can be quite useful, and I think might be underestimated by some. But at the same time, there are some of these level 20 talents that might be a bit better. In Anub'arak's case, Resurgence of the Storm is probably one of his best, especially if you're going for Web Blast. And again, this could really depend upon your personal playstyle or maybe the team that you're playing with. But honestly, Resurgence of the Storm is really useful for Anub'arak. The others, not so much. Hive Master, I think, would come at second for him, because if you're getting the Locust, then that gives you additional healing and allows you to sustain a little bit more. Alright, so that is Anub'arak and all of his abilities. So the last thing I'll do, as I usually do, is we'll go ahead and poke him a bit and see what he says. No one's really given me feedback one way or the other if they really care for the format with this, or if they really care to hear what they say. And there are other videos that focus only on that, so if you want to see those, let me know. I can always take this part out if you want. So ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for staying with me for this, and I'll get you a couple matches with Anub'arak. So here we go, the poke quotes.
Speak! Time is fleeting. The strands of destiny weave only a web of death. I am first among the Crypt Lords, and a servant of the Lich King. I don't have to take this from you. If you can feel the ground moving, it's already too late. Raids! Oh, did anyone catch the name of that guild? Paragon, was it? You think I'm big? You should see my stepmother. Ever notice how it's exactly when you get your purple items organized that heroes drop in unexpectedly? The key to efficient web crawling is proper distribution. There is a saying in Ajol Narub: in the kingdom of the spiders, the giant carnivorous beetle is the king. The feud between Crypt Lords and Blood Lords is eternal. Bugs this big become features. Don't be a noob. Only I'm allowed to do that. I'm making that sound myself. 10 more minutes of this abuse and I will go berserk.